In this video, I will show how to work with the demand and supply functions, that is, how to find the equilibrium point and consumers and producers surplus. First, let's recall the definition for equilibrium point and consumers and producers surplus from economics. So we have supply and demand curve, and supply is increasing and demand is decreasing function. So the input variable here is the quantity and the output is the price. So both functions are functions of quantity. So where the functions intersect, that's called the equilibrium point, and it has two coordinates, input labeled QE and output labeled PE. E stands for the equilibrium. Now this horizontal line passing through the equilibrium point divides this region between supply and demand curve into two subregions. The one closest to the demand is, since demand is associated with consumers, so it's easy to remember, it's called consumer surplus. And the one below the line, closer to the supply curve, and since supply curve is associated with producers, so it makes it easy to remember, the region represents producer surplus. So to find the producer surplus and consumer surplus, what we do, we just use integrals and just simplifying this area geometrically. So consumer surplus, therefore, will be equal to the area under the demand curve from 0 to QE minus the area of this rectangle. So we just subtract QE, PE, and producer surplus will be the area, this area right here, which we can find by starting with the rectangle and then taking away the area underneath the supply curve. So this is these are the simple formulas to find consumer surplus and producer surplus. So to get started, let's find the equilibrium first. And to find the equilibrium in part A, we simply have to set D of Q equal to S of Q. And we're going to write this in standard form. So we have 4/3 Q squared plus 2Q plus 70, or rather minus 60. And we're going to multiply by 3, divide by 2. So we have 2Q squared plus 3Q minus 90, and we're going to solve this quadratic equation, and I'm going to try to factor it. So I'm looking for two numbers whose product is 180, but the sum is 3. So let me do it here real quick. So the product is 180, or rather negative 180, and the sum is 3. So 180 can be broken down into 60 times 3. So we have 15 times 4. So it looks like 15 and 12 will work. So 12 negative 15, or negative 12 plus 15. So we have 2Q squared plus 15Q minus 12Q minus 90 equals to 0. And we have 2Q plus 15 times Q, and I'm going to factor out 6 here, Q minus 6. So there are two solutions, Q equals negative 7/2 or Q equals 6. So Q equals negative 7/2 is not in the domain, so we're going to discard that solution. So Q at equilibrium is equal to 6, and we still have to find price at the equilibrium, and to find price we just plug in the Q that we found to one of the two equations, and it doesn't matter which one, both of them will give you the same value. So it seems like the price at the equilibrium is $29 per unit. Now, to find the consumer surplus, we simply have to set up and find the following integral. From 0 to 6, we integrate dq, which is 65 minus q squared, and we take away the area of that rectangle, which is 6 times 29. So antiderivative f is 65q minus 1/3 q cubed, evaluated from 0 to 6, and taking away 6 times 29. 6 times 29 is 174. So plugging in 6 into this antiderivative, we get 65 times 6 minus 1/3 times 6 cubed minus 0 minus 174. So 65 times 6 is 390. 6 cubed divided by 3 is 72 minus 174. So the answer is 390 minus 246, so it's 4, 4, 1. So 144. And what are the units here? Since we're integrating and finding the area, we multiply the units of P and Q. So Q is thousands of units, P is dollars per unit. So the final answer would be $144,000. Same thing we repeat for producer's surplus. We set up the following integral: 6 times 29 minus integral from 0 to 6. But this time we integrate the supply function, and we get 174 minus antiderivative of this is 1/9 q cubed plus q squared plus 5q, evaluated from 0 to 6, which is 174, and at 0 the whole antiderivative is 0, so I just have to evaluate it at 6. So 1/9 6 cubed plus 6 squared plus 5 times 6, and we get 174 minus, and in parentheses we have 6 cubed divided by 9, it's 24 plus 36 is 60. 60 plus 30 is 90. So we have 174 minus 90, which is 84. And the units are thousands of dollars. So this is how we find consumers and producers surplus when demand and supply functions are given.